They didn't raise their voices, they didn't fight, they didn't even argue. But what she said cut deeper than anything I had ever heard. You're not on the $64 million deed. In that moment, everything went silent. Not outside, inside me. Because sometimes, it's not the loud moments that break you, it's the quiet ones. The ones where you finally understand your place in someone else's life. Tell me honestly, have you ever felt like you gave everything and still, it wasn't enough? Because that's exactly where I was standing. Right there in a house I helped build. In a family I supported, feeling like a stranger. I didn't respond. Not because I agreed. But because I was trying to understand. How did it come to this? Years of my life. Given without hesitation, without conditions, without keeping score. I was there when they needed help. I was there when things were falling apart. I was there when no one else showed up. And now I was being reminded that none of it made me belong. That sentence stayed in my mind. Not for minutes. Not for hours, but for days. You're not on the deed. It wasn't about money, let me make that clear. It was never about the $64 million. It was about value, respect, place. Because when someone says that to you, what they really mean is, you don't matter here. And that realization, it's painful, but it's also powerful. Because pain, when you face it, becomes clarity. That night I sat alone. No TV, no phone, and no distractions. Just me and my thoughts. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't avoid them. I asked myself something I had been ignoring for years. Am I truly respected here or just tolerated? And deep down I already knew the answer. You see, we all know the truth, we just don't want to face it. Because facing it means things have to change. And change, it's uncomfortable. It's scary. It forces you to step into the unknown. But staying in a place where you're not valued, that slowly destroys you. I remembered the small things, the little moments I ignored. The tone in conversations. The lack of appreciation, the way decisions were made without me. At the time they felt small. Unimportant. But now, they all made sense. Because disrespect doesn't start it starts quietly. And grows when you ignore it. Tell me, how many times have you ignored something just to keep peace? How many times have you stayed silent just to avoid conflict? How many times have you convinced yourself, it's okay, it's not a big deal? Until one day it becomes too big to ignore. That was my moment, the moment everything became clear. And clarity changes you. Because once you see your reality for what it is, you can't go back to pretending. The next morning I woke up differently. Nothing had changed, the house was the same, the people were the same, the routine was the same. But I wasn't. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't angry. I was aware. And awareness is dangerous. Because it doesn't let you tolerate things anymore. I moved through the house quietly, observing, not reacting, watching how people spoke, how they acted, how they treated me. And what I saw confirmed everything. I wasn't included. I wasn't considered. I wasn't valued. I was just there. Existing, not belonging. And that's when I realized something powerful. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. That kind of loneliness, it hits differently. Because it's not about being alone. It's about being unseen, unheard, unappreciated. That day something else happened, something small, but meaningful. I was in the kitchen, doing what I always do, helping, cleaning, giving. And no one noticed. No thank you. No acknowledgement. No appreciation. And suddenly it hit me, I had made this my identity. Being the one who gives, the one who supports, the one who stays quiet. But here's the truth, if you keep giving without boundaries, people start expecting it. And when something becomes expected, it's no longer appreciated. Let that sink in. Because many people don't lose respect overnight, they lose it slowly, by allowing too much. That realization, it changed how I saw everything. I went back to my room, closed the door, sat down, and asked myself one simple question. If nothing changes, can I live like this for the rest of my life? The answer came instantly, no, and that no was the beginning of everything. Because the moment you decide, I deserve better, your life starts to shift. Not immediately, not magically, but internally. And internal change always comes before external change. I didn't make a scene, that I didn't confront anyone, that I didn't explain myself. Because sometimes silence is more powerful than words. I started planning. Quietly, carefully. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because I realized if I'm not valued here, then I need to value myself enough to walk away. And that decision, it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Backhand index pointing right if you're still watching, type I choose myself in the comments, because that one decision can change your entire life. And trust me, what I did next no one saw coming. The next morning, I didn't say anything. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had finally learned something powerful. Not every truth needs to be spoken, some truths need to be acted on. I moved through the house quietly, same routine, same faces, same voices. But this time I wasn't the same person. Because now I was watching, not reacting, not explaining, just observing. And what I started to notice changed everything. Little things. Things I had ignored for years. The way decisions were made without asking me. The way conversations stopped when I entered the room. The way my presence felt optional. You see, disrespect doesn't always come loudly. It hides in patterns. And patterns never lie. Tell me, have you ever felt like you were giving your best but slowly becoming invisible? That's where I was. Not rejected directly, but not included either. And that feeling, it's heavy. Because you don't know whether to stay or finally walk away. That day I did something different. I stopped trying. Not dramatically, not obviously. Just quietly. I didn't rush to help. I didn't jump into every task. I didn't fill every silence with effort. And something interesting happened. No one noticed. Let that sink in. Because the moment you stop overgiving, you realize something painful. People were never depending on you, they were just used to you. And there's a difference. I went to my room that afternoon, sat down and just thought. No distractions, no excuses, no denial. Just truth. Have I been forcing myself into a place where I don't belong? That question hit hard. Because deep down I already knew the answer. Yes. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I stayed too long in a place that stopped valuing me. And that realization, it didn't break me. It woke me up. Because for the first time I wasn't blaming them. I was taking responsibility for myself. Listen carefully, there's a big difference between blaming others and understanding your role in your own pain. I had allowed this. I had ignored signs. I had stayed silent. I had accepted less than I deserved. Not because I was weak, but because I cared. But caring without boundaries turns into suffering. And that's exactly what happened. That evening something else happened. A conversation. Not about me but around me. I was sitting nearby quietly when I heard them talking. Plans, decisions, future discussions. And I wasn't included. Not even mentioned. In that moment, everything became clear. I wasn't part of their future. I was just part of their past. That realization, it didn't hurt the way you think. It didn't feel like rejection. It felt like clarity. Because sometimes life doesn't push you out loudly. It shows you that you no longer fit. And that's your sign to move. That night I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. I felt something new. Detachment. And detachment is powerful. Because when you detach, you stop expecting, you stop hoping, you stop chasing. And when you stop all that, you finally see reality. I started looking at the house differently. Not as home, but as a place I was ready to leave. And that shift, it changes everything. Because when your mind lets go, your actions follow. I opened my drawer that night and started organizing small things. Not packing, not leaving. Just preparing. Quietly, carefully. Because I knew something, when I make my move, it has to be final. No going back. No hesitation, no regret. And that kind of decision requires clarity. Not emotion. Days passed. And I continued the same pattern. Less talking, more observing. Less giving, more protecting. And slowly something inside me grew stronger. Confidence. Not loud confidence, not visible confidence, but the kind that comes from knowing, I don't need to stay where I'm not valued. And that confidence, it's life-changing. Because now you don't fear leaving. You fear staying. Tell me honestly, what scares you more, starting over or staying stuck? Because for me the answer became clear. Staying was no longer an option. And once you reach that point, there's no going back. Backhand index pointing right if you're still here, type I'm done settling in the comments, because that moment, when you stop settling, is the moment your life begins to change. And trust me, what I planned next was something no one in that house expected. There's a moment right before everything changes. It's quiet, so quiet that most people miss it. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's just a decision. And that night I made mine. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But out of clarity. I'm leaving. Those two words, they didn't come from emotion, they came from truth. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't confused anymore. I knew exactly where I stood, and more importantly, I knew what I deserved. Tell me something, how long can a person stay in a place where they feel unseen, unheard, unvalued? A week? A year? A lifetime? Many people choose a lifetime. Not because they want to, but because they're afraid of what comes next. The unknown. The uncertainty. The fear of starting over. But here's what I realized: staying in the wrong place is more painful than stepping into the unknown. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was worried, but because my mind was clear. Clear in a way it had never been before. I started thinking about everything. Where I would go, what I would do, how I would rebuild. And for the first time, those thoughts didn't scare me. They excited me. Because I wasn't losing something. I was freeing myself. The next morning, everything looked normal. Just like every other day. But inside me, a new chapter had already begun. I moved quietly. Not rushing, not panicking. Just preparing. I opened my closet, looked at my clothes, and realized something strange. I didn't need most of them. Because when you're about to start over, you understand something powerful. You don't need much to begin again. Just courage. I started sorting things slowly, carefully. Not packing everything. Just choosing what truly mattered. Because this time, I wasn't just leaving a place. I was leaving a version of myself behind. The version that stayed silent. The version that accepted less. The version that kept adjusting. And I was stepping into someone new. Someone who chooses herself. Someone who knows her worth. Someone who doesn't stay where she's not valued. That transformation, it doesn't happen outside first. It happens inside. Before anyone sees it, before anyone notices it, you become different. And then your life follows. Days passed, and I kept preparing. Quietly. No announcements. No discussions. No explanations. Because I had learned something: not everyone deserves to be part of your next chapter. Let that sink in. Because we often feel the need to explain our decisions. To justify our actions. To seek approval. But when you're clear, you don't need any of that. You just move. One evening I sat alone again. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy. Not painful. Peaceful. Because I knew I was no longer stuck. I asked myself one last question. Am I ready? And the answer came instantly. Yes. Not because everything was perfect. Not because I had all the answers. But because I had something more important: courage. Courage to leave. Courage to start over. Courage to trust myself. And that's all you need. Tell me, what's one thing in your life right now that you know you need to walk away from, but you're still holding on? A place? A relationship? A situation? Because deep down you already know. You're just waiting for the right time. But here's the truth: the right time is when you decide. Nothing changes until you do. That night, I took a deep breath, looked around the room, and said quietly, this is the last time. Not with sadness. Not with regret. But with closure. Because I wasn't leaving in pain. I was leaving in power. And there's a big difference. The next step I took was something no one expected. Not even me. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still watching, type, I'm ready to move on in the comments. Because that moment when you decide to move on is the moment your life begins again. And trust me, what happened next changed everything. The hardest part isn't leaving. It's leaving without making noise, without explaining, without looking back. Because when you finally decide to walk away, there's always that voice inside you. Should I say something? Should I tell them how I feel? Should I make them understand? And for a moment, I almost did. I almost sat them down, explained everything, told them how much it hurt, how much I gave, how invisible I felt. But then I realized something powerful: people who never valued you won't suddenly understand you. And that realization, it saved me. Because I wasn't leaving to prove a point, that I was leaving to protect my peace. So I chose silence. Not weak silence. Not fearful silence. Strong silence. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't seek closure from others. Because real closure comes from within. That night, I didn't pack loudly. I didn't rush. I moved slowly, carefully. Folding clothes, choosing what to take, leaving behind what no longer mattered. And with every item I picked up, I felt lighter. Not because I was losing things, but because I was letting go. Letting go of expectations, letting go of attachment, letting go of a version of life that was never truly mine. Tell me, have you ever held on to something just because you were used to it? Not because it made you happy, not because it fulfilled you, but simply because it was familiar. That's the hardest thing to let go of. Familiar pain. Because even pain feels comfortable when you've lived with it for too long. But growth demands change. And change demands courage. By midnight, everything was ready. Not a lot of bags, not a lot of things. Just what I needed. Because when you truly understand life, you realize something important: you don't need much to start over. Just clarity. I looked around the room one last time. Not with sadness, not with regret, but with understanding. This place taught me something. Not about them, but about me. It showed me where I was settling, where I was shrinking, where I was losing myself. And for that, I was grateful. Because sometimes the most painful places teach you the most powerful lessons. I picked up my bag, walked toward the door, and paused, not because I was unsure, but because I knew this moment was the turning point of my life. Once I step out, everything changes. No going back. No second guessing. Just forward. And in that moment, I didn't feel fear. I felt freedom. I opened the door and stepped out. Quietly. No one stopped me. No one asked. No one noticed. And that told me everything I needed to know. Because when you leave and no one tries to stop you, it means you were never truly held. Let that sink in. I walked outside, took a deep breath. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I had forgotten. Peace. Not temporary peace. Not forced peace. Real peace. The kind that comes when you finally choose yourself. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I didn't have a perfect plan. But I had something stronger than a plan: belief. Belief that I deserved better. Belief that I could rebuild. Belief that this was the right decision. And that belief, it carried me forward. Step by step. Tell me, how many times have you stayed somewhere just because you were afraid to leave? Afraid of the unknown. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of being alone. But here's the truth: you're already alone when you're not valued. And once you understand that, leaving becomes easier. Not easy, but easier. I walked away from that house, but more importantly, I walked back to myself. And that's the real journey. Not leaving a place. Finding yourself again. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still here, type "I choose freedom" in the comments. Because the moment you choose freedom is the moment your life begins to change. And trust me, what happened next was something I never imagined. Because leaving was just the beginning. The truth is, leaving was the easiest part. What came after, that's what really tests you. Because when you walk away from everything familiar, you don't just lose a place, you lose comfort, routine, certainty. And suddenly it's just you. Alone. With your thoughts. With your decisions, with your new reality. That first night, I didn't have everything figured out. No perfect plan. No clear direction. Just a quiet room and a mind that refused to go back. Tell me something. Have you ever reached a point in life where going back is no longer an option? Even if moving forward feels uncertain. That's where I was. I sat there in silence, and for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about me. What do I want? What kind of life do I deserve? Who do I want to become now? Questions I had ignored for so long were finally being answered. And the answers were simple, but powerful. Peace, respect, freedom. Not luxury, not money, not approval. Just a life where I feel valued. And that realization, it changed everything. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I had somewhere important to go, but because something inside me felt different. Light. For years, I carried emotional weight, silent pain, unspoken frustration. And now it was gone. Not because my life was perfect, but because I removed what was hurting me. That's the power of letting go. You don't fix everything, you just stop holding what's breaking you. Days turned into weeks. And slowly, I started rebuilding. Not a big life. Not a flashy life. A real life. I found a small place, simple, quiet. But it felt like home. Because for the first time, I chose it. I created a routine, simple habits, peaceful mornings, calm evenings. No pressure. No expectations. No emotional noise. Just me living on my terms. and something beautiful started happening. I started smiling again. Not fake smiles, not forced happiness. Real smiles, the kind that comes from within. Because I wasn't trying to fit in anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just being. And that feeling, it's priceless. I also noticed something else. The more I focused on myself, the less I thought about the past. Not because I forgot, but because I moved forward. And that's important. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing beyond what hurt you. Tell me, how much of your energy is still stuck in the past? Thinking about what happened, who hurt you, what you lost. But what if you used that same energy to build something new? That's what I did. Step by step, day by day. I started discovering myself again. What I like, what I enjoy, what makes me feel alive. Things I had forgotten while trying to keep others happy. And that's when I realized something powerful. When you stop living for others, you finally start living for yourself. Time passed. And one day I received a message from them. Short, simple. Where did you go? I looked at the message and for a moment I smiled. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because now I understood everything. I wasn't missed because I was valued. I was missed because I was useful. And that difference, it changes how you see people. I didn't reply immediately. Not because I was playing games, but because I no longer felt the urgency. I had my own life now. My own peace. My own space. And that was enough. Eventually I replied. I'm doing well. That's it. No explanation. No details. No emotions. Just truth. Because I didn't owe anyone my story anymore. And that's freedom, real freedom. If you're listening right now, I want you to understand something deeply. You don't need to stay where you're not respected. You don't need to explain your worth. You don't need to beg for a place in someone's life. You create your own place. And the moment you realize that, everything changes. You become stronger, clearer, more confident. Not because life is easy, but because you are no longer confused. And clarity, it's power. So if you're in a situation right now where you feel unseen, unappreciated, unvalued, take a moment, pause, and ask yourself, do I deserve better? And if the answer is yes, then don't wait. Because your life won't change until you do. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched you, type, I choose myself in the comments. Because that decision is where your new life begins. And if you want more real, powerful stories like this, stories that don't just motivate you, but transform the way you think, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Because this isn't just content. This is a reminder that your peace matters, your value matters, and your life is in your hands. So walk away from what doesn't respect you, build what aligns with you, and never forget, the moment you choose yourself is the moment your real life begins. Stay strong, stay wise, and I'll see you in the next story.